The sun bathed Los Angeles in a warm, golden glow, illuminating the vibrant streets bustling with life. Keanu Reeves walked among the throngs of pedestrians, his presence both unassuming and magnetic. Dressed in a simple black t-shirt and well-worn jeans, he blended seamlessly into the crowd, yet something about his demeanor set him apart. There was a calmness about him, a quiet confidence that seemed to resonate with those who brushed past. As he ambled along, he took in the sights and sounds of the city. Street performers entertaining small clusters of onlookers, the aroma of fresh coffee wafting from nearby cafes, and the lively chatter of people going about their day. Keanu's mind, however, was occupied with a singular goal. He sought a unique car to restore. He had always been fascinated by the artistry and craftsmanship of classic vehicles, particularly those with a rich history. For him, restoring a car was more than just a hobby. It was a way to breathe new life into something that had been forgotten, a metaphor for the potential for renewal in all aspects of life. As he passed a particularly alluring vintage car parked along the curb, he couldn't help but smile at its polished chrome and elegant curves. One day, he murmured to himself, lost in daydreams of reviving such a beauty. As he continued his stroll, he decided to pause at a quaint cafe that he frequented whenever he found himself in this part of town. The establishment was adorned with lush plants and colorful murals, giving it a cozy, inviting atmosphere. Pushing open the glass door, he was greeted by the familiar sound of espresso machines hissing and the soft murmur of patrons engaged in conversation. Keanu approached the counter, glancing at the menu, though he already knew what he wanted. "Hey, Keanu, the usual?" the barista asked with a grin, her eyes sparkling with recognition. "Yeah, please. Just a black coffee," he replied, his voice warm and genuine. As she busily prepared his drink, he scanned the cafe, noticing the eclectic mix of people. Students huddled over textbooks, artists sketching the world around them, and friends sharing laughter over pastries. It was a comforting sight. Taking his coffee, he found a quiet corner by the window where he could watch the world go by. He took a sip, savoring the rich flavor, and let his mind wander. The thought of finding the perfect car lingered, but it was intertwined with a deeper reflection on purpose. He believed that his work as an actor allowed him to connect with people on a profound level, but he also yearned for something tangible, something he could touch, restore, and cherish. "Why not give it a shot?" he mused aloud, unconsciously speaking to the empty chair across from him. "It's time to find that dream car." Finishing his coffee, Keanu felt rejuvenated, ready to embrace the day ahead. He rose from his seat and glanced at his watch, noting that it was nearly time to head to the luxury car dealership he had heard about through a friend. The place was known for housing rare vehicles, and he was excited at the prospect of discovering something extraordinary. Arriving at the dealership, he parked his modest car in the lot, a stark contrast to the gleaming luxury vehicles displayed under the carefully crafted lighting. As Keanu stepped out, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension. He had always felt somewhat out of place in environments marked by opulence and exclusivity. However, his resolve to find a car worth restoring outweighed his discomfort. As he entered the dealership, the atmosphere shifted. The space was filled with polished marble floors and walls adorned with awards and accolades. The air was thick with the scent of leather and new paint, a testament to the high-end vehicles that surrounded him. Sales staff, dressed in crisp suits, moved about with an air of superiority, their eyes scanning the room for potential buyers. Keanu's presence was met with a few curious glances, but most seemed oblivious to his arrival. "Can I help you?" a voice called from behind a sleek desk. It was a salesman, his tone dripping with condescension as he sized Keanu up. The man's well-groomed appearance contrasted sharply with Keanu's casual attire. "I'm interested in looking at some of your rare cars," Keanu replied, maintaining an even tone. He gestured toward the rows of gleaming machinery, each more breathtaking than the last. The salesman chuckled lightly, his expression turning skeptical. "Rare cars, huh? Well, we have quite the collection, but I can't imagine you'd be in the market for anything here." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, clearly dismissing Keanu as just another dreamer. Keanu felt the weight of the man's assumptions. "Actually, I'm quite serious about restoring a classic car," he insisted, his voice steady. "I've always had a passion for vehicles with character and history." The salesman raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Right. Well, if you're not looking to waste anyone's time, perhaps you could take a look at our less exclusive models. His tone was laced with sarcasm, and Keanu felt a rush of indignation rise within him. He took a breath, reminding himself that this moment was not about the man's prejudice, but about the cars that held stories waiting to be revived. "I assure you, I'm quite capable of purchasing a vehicle from this dealership," Keanu stated, his calm demeanor unwavering. "I'd love to hear more about the history of some of the classics you have." The salesman rolled his eyes, clearly uninterested in engaging further. "Sure, if you're set on browsing, go ahead," he muttered, turning his attention back to the computer screen on his desk. Keanu felt a flicker of frustration, but chose to ignore it. He walked deeper into the showroom, scanning the rows of cars. Each one was a masterpiece in its own right, polished to perfection and gleaming under the showroom lights. He approached a stunning vintage Mustang, its deep blue paint reflecting the light like a jewel. As he leaned closer, admiring the craftsmanship, he could hear the faint whispers of the staff behind him, their laughter echoing in the vast space. "Look at that guy," one of them snickered. "Does he really think he belongs here?" Keanu's heart sank at the blatant disregard for his passion and presence. He had always been an advocate for kindness and respect, and hearing such disdain was disheartening. Yet he remained resolute, his eyes trained on the car before him, envisioning the restoration process, the joy of breathing life back into something that had been loved and then neglected. With each passing moment, he felt more determined to prove that true value lay not in wealth or appearance, but in the essence of one's character. Today was meant to be a day of discovery and connection, not just with a car, but with the very principles that guided his life. Little did he know, this seemingly ordinary day would soon spiral into an extraordinary journey, challenging the prejudices that permeated not only the dealership, but the world beyond its walls. Keanu stood before the gleaming red classic car, its curves reflecting the fluorescent lights of the luxury dealership. He was genuinely captivated by its history and craftsmanship, and he leaned in closer, running his fingers over the smooth surface. The salesman, a tall man with slicked back hair and an air of superiority, watched Keanu's fascination with barely concealed disdain. "Interesting, isn't it?" Keanu said, his voice calm and thoughtful. "I've read that this model was one of the last to feature a hand-stitched interior. It must have taken hours of meticulous work to finish this beauty." The salesman snorted, arms crossed over his chest. "Sure, buddy. You know, we get a lot of dreamers in here who think they can just waltz in and talk about cars like they own the place. But let's be honest, you don't look like you belong in this kind of establishment." Keanu felt the sting of the man's words, but chose to respond with grace. "I'm not here to impress anyone. I just appreciate the artistry that went into this car." The salesman rolled his eyes, sarcasm dripping from his voice. "Artistry doesn't pay the bills, my friend. I'm guessing you're just another guy who wants to relive his high school fantasies. You do know this car is a six-figure investment, right?" Keanu straightened up, meeting the salesman's gaze with steady eyes. "I'm aware of its value, but cars like this represent more than just money. They symbolize passion and history." Richard, the dealership manager, entered the scene just then, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was a stout man with a finely tailored suit that screamed wealth and power. His gaze flicked between Keanu and the salesman, and a smirk tugged at the corners of his mouth as he took in the situation. "What's going on here?" Richard asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "I see we have a collector in the making. Isn't it adorable how the little guys always dream big?" Keanu felt the weight of Richard's words. It was as if the room had shifted, the air growing heavier with tension. "I'm not just dreaming, sir. I believe in the value of craftsmanship and history. This car deserves to be appreciated, not reduced to a price tag." Richard laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Appreciated? Look at you. You don't even know what you're talking about. You're dressed like you just strolled off a movie set, and I doubt you have the means to even think about affording this beauty." His eyes narrowed, his tone dripping with an arrogance that seemed to fill the room. "People like you don't belong in a place like this." Keanu felt a rush of anger, but he took a deep breath, reminding himself that this moment was bigger than him. "With all due respect, it shouldn't matter what I wear or how much money I have. What matters is the respect we show each other, regardless of our backgrounds." Richard leaned in closer, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Respect is earned, not given, my friend, and you're not earning any here. If you want to waste my time, I have better things to do." This is a high-end dealership, not a charity for wannabe car enthusiasts. Keanu maintained his composure. I'm not here for charity, Richard. I'm here because I appreciate the artistry. It's disappointing to see how you judge people based on their appearance rather than their passion or knowledge. The salesman chimed in, a smirk plastered across his face. Passion doesn't pay for a car, though, does it? You need cold, hard cash for that. And from the looks of it, you're fresh out of luck. Richard glanced at the salesman, a flicker of camaraderie passing between them. Exactly. People come in here expecting to be treated like royalty, but they need to understand that this is a business. We cater to a specific clientele, and let's face it, you're not it. Keanu's heart sank slightly, but he refused to let their disdain overshadow his spirit. I understand that, but I also believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. The way you speak to me reflects more on you than it does on me. Richard's expression darkened, and Keanu could sense the shift in the atmosphere. The other employees were beginning to notice the confrontation, their furtive glances filled with curiosity and discomfort. You're in over your head, Keanu. This isn't a movie where you can just play the hero and walk away unscathed. You're out of your league. Keanu took a step back, feeling the weight of Richard's words. Maybe it's not about leagues. Maybe it's about humanity. And maybe it's time for people like you to realize that wealth doesn't define worth. Richard scoffed, shaking his head. You have no idea how the world works. It's not about what's fair. It's about how much you can spend. And I'm afraid you don't have the resources to play in this arena. Keanu paused, feeling the tension build around him. You may have power in this room, but power doesn't equate to respect. I may not fit your mold, but that doesn't mean I'm less deserving of it. Richard's lips curled into a smug smile. You'll learn that lesson the hard way, just like all the others who think they can walk in here and make demands. As he turned to leave, Keanu felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. It was more than just a disagreement. It was a clash of values. He had entered the dealership hoping to connect with something he loved, but instead, he was met with walls of elitism and disdain. Good luck finding what you're looking for, Richard called over his shoulder, his voice laced with mockery. Keanu took a deep breath, allowing the air to fill his lungs before exhaling slowly. Thank you, but it's not just about finding a car. It's about finding a place that values respect, regardless of who walks through the door. With that, he turned and walked toward the exit, the weight of the encounter hanging heavily in the air. As the door closed behind him, he felt a mixture of frustration and determination. The day had not gone as planned, but he knew that standing up for dignity was worth every moment of discomfort. The world needed to hear these stories, to understand that respect should be a universal currency, not one relegated to the wealthy few. As the tension in the luxury car dealership reached a boiling point, Richard, the dealership manager, could feel the eyes of both staff and customers trained on him and Keanu Reeves. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, an electric silence punctuated only by the occasional rustle of fabric or the muted hum of the air conditioning. Richard's frustration mounted, and he made a threatening gesture, a sweeping motion with his hand that was both dismissive and intimidating. Look, buddy, Richard spat out, his voice dripping with condescension. You clearly don't know what it takes to belong here. Just because you're some celebrity doesn't mean you can waltz in and act like you own the place. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, it felt as if the entire dealership had collectively held its breath. Keanu, standing calmly before Richard, refused to back down. He took a small step forward, his demeanor unflinching despite the palpable hostility. Respect isn't reserved for those who can afford it, he replied, his voice steady and firm. You don't know me or the reasons I'm here, and frankly, your assumptions do a disservice to everyone in this room. Richard scoffed, his bravado faltering slightly as Keanu's words hung in the air. And what would you know about it? This is a place for people who understand value, who know how to navigate the high stakes of wealth and status, he retorted, crossing his arms defiantly. No, Keanu countered, his gaze unwavering. You've confused wealth with worth. The value of a person or their dreams cannot be measured by attire or bank account. I'm here because I believe in the beauty of restoring something that's been overlooked, just as I believe in the importance of treating everyone with dignity. As Keanu spoke, a few customers began to murmur amongst themselves, their interest piqued by the interaction. One young man, dressed in a crisp suit, leaned closer to his companion. Who does this guy think he is? he whispered, though the question lacked the venom present in Richard's voice. Maybe he's right, his friend replied, glancing at Keanu with newfound respect. You can't really judge someone based on how they look or where they come from. Richard's face flushed with anger, but he was starting to realize that the tide was turning. The silence that filled the dealership weighed heavily against him. Keanu's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Richard's escalating frustration, and the spectators began to sense the shift in power. Let's get one thing straight, Richard blustered, but his voice lacked the conviction it had moments before. You're in the wrong place. This isn't a charity, it's a business, and you clearly don't fit the mold of our clientele. Keanu stepped closer, his expression earnest. And that's where you're wrong. Business should be about connection, not exclusion. I came to this dealership because I believed I could find something special, something that would allow me to give back. I didn't expect to be treated like an outsider. A woman in her 50s, who had been observing from the sidelines, finally spoke up. You know, I've been coming here for years, and I've never seen anyone treated like this before. It's appalling. Her voice was steady, but the indignation was clear. Richard took a step back, momentarily disarmed. This is about quality control, not discrimination, he retorted, but the conviction in his voice was beginning to waver. Quality control? Keanu echoed, a hint of disbelief in his tone. You're confusing quality with elitism. What you're practicing is exclusion, and it reflects poorly on you, on all of you. He gestured to the staff, who had been watching the exchange with a mix of confusion and intrigue. You're all better than this. You can create an environment that welcomes everyone, regardless of their background or appearance. The dealership's employees exchanged glances, some nodding slowly, as if awakening from a trance. The young man in the suit spoke again, this time with more conviction. He's right. We should be valuing people for who they are, not what they wear or how much money they have. Richard's face darkened, but he was losing ground. This is a business, and we have standards to uphold, he insisted, though the words felt increasingly hollow. Standards that alienate? Keanu pressed, his voice rising slightly as he addressed the growing crowd. Is that what you want your brand to represent? The notion that only the wealthy deserve respect? Because that's a standard I cannot support. The murmuring grew louder, the atmosphere shifting from one of tension to one of solidarity. A few customers began to step forward, emboldened by Keanu's words. I've seen better treatment at local shops, one man declared. This isn't how you build a community. Richard's shoulders slumped slightly, the fight draining from him as he realized the tide was turning against him. Keanu took a deep breath, sensing the shift as well. I'm not here to fight, he said, his tone softening. I'm here to remind you of what truly matters. It's not about the cars or the status. It's about the respect we show each other. Why not just walk away? Richard muttered, desperate to regain control of the situation, but Keanu shook his head. Because I believe in the potential for change, he answered. I believe that we can create a space where everyone feels valued and respected. That's the kind of legacy worth pursuing. The silence that followed was profound, as if the weight of Keanu's words had settled over the dealership like a blanket. It was a moment of reflection, a collective processing of the exchange that had just unfolded. Richard, still visibly shaken, shifted his weight uncomfortably, his authority eroding. Finally, it was a middle-aged woman, a longtime customer, who broke the silence. I think we all need to take a hard look at ourselves and how we treat others, she said, her voice steady. This isn't just about cars. It's about how we want to treat one another as human beings. Keanu offered a slight nod, gratitude shining in his eyes. Thank you, he said, addressing the woman. It starts with each one of us. Together, we can make a difference. The mood in the dealership had transformed, and the onlookers began to applaud, their claps echoing against the polished walls. Keanu stood tall, a symbol of resilience in the face of prejudice, and for the first time that day, he felt a sense of belonging, not for his fame, but for the values he stood for. Richard's face contorted in frustration, but he remained silent, the applause drowning out his last attempts to salvage the encounter. For the first time, he realized that power did not rest solely in wealth or status, but in the hearts of those who chose to stand up for what was right. As the clapping subsided, Keanu took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Thank you all for your support, he said, his voice calm yet resonant. Let's remember that respect should be universal, not conditional. Together, we can create a community where everyone feels valued. And in that moment, within the walls of that luxury car dealership, a seed of change had been sown, one that would grow far beyond the confines of that day, igniting a movement rooted in humanity and respect. The tension in the luxury car dealership hung thick in the air, a palpable mix of disdain and disbelief as Richard's bravado began to falter. Keanu stood firm, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the agitated atmosphere around him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of a luxury vehicle's engine outside, a reminder of the very world that seemed to be mocking him at that moment. Richard's composure wavered, his eyes darting nervously as he searched for words to regain his authority. But Keanu, sensing the shift, seized the opportunity. He stepped forward slightly, his voice steady and resonant. "You know, Richard, it's not the cars that define us. It's how we treat one another. Dignity and respect aren't reserved for the wealthy. They should be the foundation of every interaction, especially in a place like this." The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, Richard appeared to shrink under the weight of Keanu's sincerity. The other employees and a handful of customers who had gathered around began to exchange glances, the reality of the situation dawning on them. Here was a man they had dismissed, a man they had underestimated, standing valiantly against the very prejudice that permeated their environment. "Look, I get it," Keanu continued, his tone softening but remaining firm. "This might be a dealership where luxury is the currency of respect, but it shouldn't be that way. You don't know me, and yet you've made assumptions based solely on how I look." Richard cleared his throat awkwardly, but no words came. His bravado had evaporated, leaving behind a man grappling with the realization that he had judged someone without even giving them a chance. Keanu took a step back, allowing Richard a moment to collect himself. "I'm not here to fight you," he added. "I'm here because I have a passion for cars, especially the ones with history, those that carry stories worth telling. But today, I found something far more important than a vehicle." The murmurs among the crowd grew louder, a mix of intrigue and unease. Keanu's presence had suddenly transformed from that of a dismissed customer to a figure of quiet authority. "What I found today," he continued, "was a reflection of how we treat people who may not fit a certain mold. It's a shame that the very space meant to celebrate beauty and craftsmanship has become a breeding ground for elitism." Richard finally found his voice, albeit shaky. I didn't mean to offend, But you did," Keanu interrupted gently. "And it's not just about me. Think about every other person who walks through those doors. How many have left feeling less than worthy because of how they were treated? The cars are beautiful, but they pale in comparison to the people who walk alongside them." The crowd was rapt, captivated by the sincerity of Keanu's words. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his earlier arrogance replaced by a dawning awareness. "I mean, I never thought about it that way," he admitted, his voice barely rising above a whisper. Keanu nodded, appreciating the admission. "That's the first step. Acknowledgement. The world doesn't need more barriers, it needs bridges. In a place where luxury is defined by price tags, we must remember that the true currency is kindness." Feeling that the moment was right, Keanu decided to share his decision. "I won't be purchasing that car today," he stated, his eyes fixed on Richard, who looked ready to protest. "Not because I don't want it, but because it's not just about the car, it's about how I was treated here. I believe in the power of vehicles to connect us, to tell stories, but I refuse to support an establishment that doesn't uphold the values of respect and humanity." Murmurs rippled through the small crowd, some nodding in agreement, while others appeared shocked. Richard's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and frustration, yet there was a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He had been confronted not just by a customer, but by a man who embodied the very essence of humility and respect. Keanu took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across the faces of those who had gathered. "I hope this serves as a wake-up call for all of us," he concluded. "Let's change the narrative. Let's create an environment where everyone feels valued, regardless of their background. True luxury isn't in the price of a car, but in the way we treat one another." As he turned to leave, a few employees murmured amongst themselves, perhaps re-evaluating their own experiences and attitudes. Keanu paused at the door, looking back one last time. "Remember, it's not just about the cars, It's about the people who love them. With that, he stepped out into the bright sunlight, leaving behind the glitz and glamour of the dealership. Outside, he took a moment to breathe in the fresh air, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The weight of the day's events lifted slightly, but he was aware that his actions would echo long after he left. Inside the dealership, the atmosphere was charged with a newfound awareness. Employees exchanged glances, their prior dismissiveness replaced with contemplation. Richard stood at the center, his mind racing as he processed the encounter. Keanu's words replayed in his head, and for the first time, he felt a crack in the facade he had built around his perception of success and worth. "Did you see how he didn't even raise his voice?" one of the younger salesmen whispered to a colleague. "He was just honest." Richard turned to his staff, a resolute expression settling on his face. "We need to change," he declared, his voice strong, though still tinged with uncertainty. "This isn't just about making sales, it's about making connections. We have to treat every person who walks through those doors with the respect they deserve." As the employees began to nod in agreement, a sense of solidarity formed among them. They had witnessed not just a confrontation, but a moment of awakening. The dealership, which had been a fortress of elitism, was now on the brink of transformation, inspired by a man who had shown them the power of humility and genuine connection. Outside, Keanu walked away from the dealership, his heart lighter. He knew that, while he had not purchased the car, he had ignited something far more valuable, a conversation that could lead to change. As he strolled down the street, he felt a sense of purpose swell within him, recognizing that sometimes the most significant impact comes not from what we take, but from what we choose to leave behind. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over Los Angeles, the world outside Keanu Reeves' quiet apartment was abuzz with news. The video of his confrontation with Richard at the luxury car dealership had exploded across social media platforms, capturing the attention of millions. The clip, just a few minutes long, showcased not only the disdain of the elitist salesman, but also Keanu's calm yet powerful rebuttal. As it made its rounds, hashtags like "Osh Respect Keanu" and "End Elitism" trended, a digital rallying cry against the prejudices that had been laid bare in that upscale showroom. In his modest living room, Keanu sat on a simple couch, scrolling through his phone. The notifications poured in like a tidal wave, each ping a new comment or share. He read through them, feeling a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "This is insane," he murmured to himself, shaking his head at some of the more outrageous comments. A message from a friend popped up. "People are really rallying behind you, man. You've triggered something big." As the evening wore on, Keanu's phone rang. It was his longtime friend and collaborator, Alex. "Hey, Keanu, I just saw the video. You're a hero, man. People are going wild. They're demanding accountability from that dealership," Alex exclaimed, his voice full of excitement. "Thanks, Alex. I didn't expect this kind of reaction. I was just trying to stand up for myself," Keanu replied, leaning back, his expression contemplative. "It's more than that, buddy. You're standing up for everyone who's ever been treated poorly because of how they look or what they have. You've become a symbol," Alex encouraged, his tone shifting to one of seriousness. "This could lead to real change." Keanu considered the weight of those words. He had never sought the spotlight, much less to be a symbol. "I just want to make sure this doesn't get twisted into something it's not. It's about respect and humanity," he insisted. "Exactly! And that's why you need to take the next step. Use this moment to advocate for something bigger," Alex suggested. "Maybe even go back to that dealership and talk to them. Show them what they need to change." "I don't know. I'm not looking for revenge. I just want to promote understanding," Keanu replied, his voice tinged with uncertainty. But deep down, he felt the stirrings of something more significant. A desire to foster a conversation about dignity in the face of elitism. The following days saw the fallout from the incident escalate. Richard, the dealership manager, faced severe backlash as his name trended alongside Keanu's. News outlets picked up the story, and the narrative shifted rapidly from celebrity gossip to a serious discussion about classism and respect in customer service. By the end of the week, Richard was fired. The dealership's reputation plummeted as more and more customers withdrew their business, opting instead for companies that promised inclusivity and respect. Keanu watched it all unfold, a feeling of satisfaction mingling with concern. He knew that, while this was a victory for many, it was important to navigate the aftermath carefully. With a clear resolve, Keanu decided that he would indeed return to the dealership, not with the intent to chastise or retaliate, but to advocate for a change in perspective. He wanted to ensure that the conversation sparked by his confrontation would continue, that it wouldn't fizzle out into nothingness. As he entered the dealership a week later, the atmosphere was noticeably different. The once pristine showroom felt heavy with tension. Employees whispered among themselves, glancing nervously at the door, unsure of what to expect. Keanu walked in, dressed in his typical understated style, a simple black t-shirt, jeans, and a leather jacket. But today, there was an air of purpose about him. "Can I help you?" a young salesman asked hesitantly, his tone wary. "I'm here to speak with whoever is in charge," Keanu replied, his voice steady. Richard had been replaced by a woman named Lisa, who had been promoted from the sales floor. She approached him, her expression a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "Mr. Reeves, I wasn't expecting to see you here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks for meeting with me, Lisa. I wanted to talk about what happened," he began, scanning the room filled with onlookers, their curiosity palpable. Lisa nodded, motioning for him to step into a more private office space. "Of course. I think it's important to address this," she said, closing the door behind them. Keanu took a deep breath. "I really appreciate you taking the time. I know that the incident was shocking for everyone involved, but I think it's a chance for all of us to learn something important." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked, her brow furrowing in thought. "I think this is about more than just one encounter. It's about how people are treated based on their appearance or perceived status. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of their circumstances," he explained, his voice firm yet compassionate. Lisa listened intently, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You're right. I've worked in this industry for years, and I've seen how customers are often judged based on their looks. It's something we need to change." Keanu nodded, encouraged by her response. "If we can create a culture here that values every customer, we can set an example for others in the industry. It starts with awareness and training," he suggested. "So, what do you propose?" Lisa asked, her eagerness evident. "I'd like to help facilitate a workshop or a series of discussions about respect and inclusivity in customer service. I think it could benefit everyone here," Keanu replied earnestly. Lisa smiled, her face lighting up. "That sounds amazing. I think the staff would appreciate it, and it would show our clients that we're committed to change. I can get the ball rolling right away." As their conversation continued, a small crowd gathered outside the office, listening in. Keanu noticed the employees' expressions shifting from skepticism to hope. He could feel a palpable change in the air. "We can't change the past, but we can shape the future," Keanu said, a gentle determination in his voice. "Let's work together to make this dealership a place where everyone feels welcome. It's not just about selling cars, it's about building relationships based on mutual respect." The enthusiasm in Lisa's voice was infectious. "I'm all in, Keanu. Let's do this." With that, Keanu felt a sense of purpose wash over him. He had come to the dealership to advocate for change, and he was beginning to see the first glimmers of hope take form. The conversation would continue, and beyond that, a movement was brewing, one that transcended the confines of a luxury car dealership. As he left the dealership, Keanu felt lighter. He knew that the journey was just beginning, but he was ready to step into this new role as an advocate for respect and dignity. The world was watching, and together, they could turn the tide of elitism into a wave of inclusivity. Keanu Reeves stepped into the luxury car dealership once more, the polished marble floor gleaming under the bright lights. The air was thick with anticipation and a hint of tension, remnants of the previous incident still lingering in the minds of the staff and customers. This time, however, he was not there to confront or challenge. He was there to educate, to advocate for a change that resonated far beyond the confines of this dealership. As he entered, a few heads turned. The staff, still grappling with the fallout of their treatment of him, exchanged wary glances. Richard, who had once been the epitome of the elitist attitude that plagued the dealership, was conspicuously absent. Instead, the atmosphere was charged with a sense of unease, as if everyone anticipated a storm. Keanu, however, wore a calm expression, one that spoke of understanding and a desire for growth. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted, his voice steady and warm. "I appreciate you all taking the time to meet with me today." His words were met with a mixture of nods and awkward silences. The staff stood in a semicircle, unsure of how to respond to the man they had misjudged so severely just days before. Keanu took a breath, his mind racing with thoughts he wanted to share. "I'm not here to blame or to shame anyone. I believe we all have the capacity to learn and grow from our experiences." He paused, letting his words sink in. What happened here last week was a reflection of something deeper, an attitude that exists not just in this dealership, but in many parts of our society. A young salesman, his face flushed with embarrassment, spoke up. "We didn't mean to disrespect you, Mr. Reeves. It's just the way things are here. We're used to dealing with a certain type of client." His voice trailed off, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Keanu nodded empathetically. "I understand, but that's precisely the problem, isn't it? When we box people into categories based on their appearance or presumed wealth, we lose sight of their humanity. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of their background." His gaze swept across the group, meeting the eyes of several employees who were beginning to understand the gravity of their actions. One woman, her brow furrowed in thought, finally spoke up. "What can we do to change this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "How do we ensure that everyone feels valued?" A smile broke across Keanu's face, a sign of hope. "It starts with small actions, a friendly greeting, a genuine interest in someone's story, treating every customer as if they are the only one that matters. It's about creating an environment where kindness is the currency and respect is non-negotiable." The dealership manager, a middle-aged man who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "I've been reflecting on your words, Mr. Reeves. I see now that we've built a culture here that favors elitism over empathy. It's time for us to change." "That's the spirit," Keanu encouraged, his tone enthusiastic. "Change begins with acknowledgement. You have the power to reshape this place, to make it a beacon of inclusivity. Imagine if, instead of turning customers away based on superficial criteria, you welcome them with open arms. The loyalty you could build would be immeasurable." As the conversation unfolded, Keanu noticed a shift in energy. The staff began to engage, sharing their own experiences and their desire for a more respectful workplace. The dialogue flowed naturally, revealing a collective yearning for change that had been stifled by fear and tradition. After an hour of discussion, Keanu leaned back in his chair, taking in the faces around him. "I want to share something else with you all," he began, his tone shifting to one of excitement. "I've decided to purchase the car I originally wanted, but not from here. I'll be going to a small local dealership known for treating all customers with dignity and respect." Surprised murmurs rippled through the group. "Why not give us a chance?" one employee asked, his brows knitting together in confusion. "Because," Keanu replied, "I believe in supporting businesses that embody the values I hold dear. This isn't just about a car, it's about making a statement. I want to show that luxury isn't defined by price tags or brand names, but by the kindness and humanity we extend to others." The room fell silent, and Keanu could see the realization dawning on their faces. They had been so focused on the prestige of the luxury market that they had forgotten the essence of true value. As he prepared to leave, Keanu stood up, his eyes shining with determination. "And there's one more thing," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "I will be auctioning the restored car for charity, with all proceeds going to initiatives that promote equality and inclusion. I believe that together we can make a difference, and I want to be a part of that change." The employees exchanged glances, a mixture of shock and admiration washing over them. One of the saleswomen, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, stepped forward. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Your kindness and willingness to speak up inspire us all. We want to do better, not just for ourselves, but for every customer who walks through our doors." Keanu smiled, warmth radiating from him. "I'm glad to hear that. Remember, it's about the journey we take together. Let's make this dealership a place where everyone feels valued and respected." As he walked out of the dealership, the sun bathed the parking lot in golden light, illuminating the path ahead. He felt a surge of hope, knowing that the seeds of change had been planted. The world outside was buzzing with life, and the ripple effect of his visit would soon be felt far and wide. In the days that followed, news of Keanu's decision to auction the car for charity spread like wildfire. Social media erupted with excitement, celebrities chiming in and fans expressing their admiration for his unwavering commitment to humanity. The small dealership he had chosen began to receive attention, and it soon became a symbol of what the automotive industry could be when kindness took precedence over elitism. Keanu's actions sparked a global movement advocating for respect and dignity in all walks of life. People began sharing their own stories of kindness and inclusion, and a campaign was born, encouraging businesses to adopt more equitable practices. Through his simple yet powerful gesture, Keanu Reeves proved that true luxury lies not in material possessions, but in the relationships we cultivate and the respect we show one another. The world was waking up to the understanding that every individual deserves to be treated with dignity, and Keanu was at the forefront of this awakening, a beacon of hope in a society yearning for change.